Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Rosie Zilinskas. How are you today, Rosie?
I am doing great, Desiree. I'm so happy to be here and chat with you about all things careers.
Yes, wonderful. And I am excited to have this conversation with you today. I think the information that you're going to be sharing is going to be so helpful for the listeners. And so welcome again. And just to share a little bit about you, Rosie, you are a 30-year corporate veteran. You are a high-performance coach, the creator and founder of No Woman Left Behind. And really, I think you are really passionate about helping others unlock their leadership potential and advance their careers. And so we're going to be talking about this and more. Tell us how this journey happened for you. Like, what led you down this path to where you are now?
Yeah, thank you, Desiree, for that and the beautiful introduction. As you said, I was in the corporate world for over 30 years, and I found myself I was around 40 years old, and I had just gone through a really horrible divorce, like a 4-year-long divorce. And I had these 2 little kids to take care of. And so I'm 40 years old, and by that time, I kind of got back on my feet. I was focusing on my career again. I was a high performer, volunteering, backing up my manager. And I'm at my desk thinking, okay, any day now, somebody's going to notice my hard work. And nobody ever noticed it. And I was just like flabbergasted because I thought literally someone was going to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Rosie, here's your promotion. That sparked me to go and talk to one of the senior executives. And the response that I got was just flabbergasting because I was like, hey, I want you to know I'm interested in becoming, a manager. And they were like, really? Why? Like, why now? I'm like, what do you mean, why now? What do you mean, really? Like, I'm a high performer. I'm doing all these things. They're like, you never said anything. It was like a lightning bolt coming down on me thinking, oh my goodness, I'm 40 years old. And I always thought that I was intentional enough, to work hard but I wasn't advocating for myself. And that's when I realized I have to change my game plan. So interestingly enough, I became a manager a couple months later. And then 3 years after that, once I felt really comfortable in that position, I started campaigning for myself. And that's how I became an advocate for women, because I know that so many of us are not doing the homework that we should be doing to advance in our careers. And also, I saw younger women, college-age women coming in, not speaking up, not asking questions, but the young men would come in around the same age, college-age graduates, and the guys would be asking questions and speaking up. So I would pull the women aside and be like, listen, we need to work on your confidence. We need to work on your handshake, on your executive presence, all that stuff. And that's how the seedling started happening. And around 2019, my kids were 15 and 17 at the time, and I had more time on my hands because they no longer wanted to hang out with me. So I started volunteering. And then from there, it was just kind of snowballed into, wow, I can actually do this. I can give back. I can help. And that's how No Woman Left Behind started, because I know that women need to help each other, support each other. And that's how it all started.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love to hear the journeys that my guests take through their life to get to where they are, because it just shows we can start, in one place and get to another, and it's not ever going to be a straight line. However, in your case, it sounds like it kind of was being in that corporate environment, but discovering that because you weren't speaking up for yourself, putting yourself out there, you were getting passed over. And I have had a previous guest on who shared the same experience. And so really This is a fantastic point to reiterate. We have got to advocate for ourselves, not just in our careers, but our health and everywhere else too. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love that you began to pass this information and knowledge to younger generations because we've got to have that too, right? We've got to have the wisdom that we have gathered and share that so that others can develop faster and not have to go through the same things that we went through. So, bravo for what you're doing. I love it. Okay. So, would you tell us then you're working to help younger girls, women in general, to advance their careers by teaching them some skills? So, I know one of the things that you talk about also is having kind of a career roadmap. So, let's talk about those things if you would.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I always say that you should have your own custom career roadmap. And essentially, what that is a plan, a strategy on how you're going to continue to advance in your career. And what happens, we as women, we're caretakers, we're nurturers. So we're taking care of everybody else. And then the last person that we think about is ourselves. And one of the ways that we women hold ourselves back is by not being intentional in our careers specifically. And a lot of times we'll leave our career on autopilot and it'll be like 3, 4, 5 years and you're still doing the same position with the same pay or maybe a very minor increase, but you're not continuing to move up to that next level, especially if you're trying to get into a leadership role, like a management role or an executive role. So the custom career roadmap has 4 phases where the first one is you assess yourself. You have to look at your skills, you have to figure out where your gaps are, and especially now in this particular day and age with the technological advances, I heard that by 2030, if you're not upskilling and embracing AI, you're going to be left behind. Do an assessment on your skills. What kind of desires, what kind of dreams do you have? What makes you happy when you get lost in your work? Getting advice from other people, and then more than anything, advertise the fact that you are looking for that leadership position. That's where I went wrong. I did all the things. I did my resume and my LinkedIn profile and my skills assessment, all those things, but I wasn't intentional enough to advertise. When I moved into a position where I was going to be applying for an executive vice president role, then I did a 180 and I did all those things, which is that custom career roadmap. But the main reason why I want women to think about this is because a lot of times when people see an opportunity, they're scrambling. Where's my resume? What do I say in an interview? And so creating your custom career roadmap makes you promotion ready. So when that next opportunity shows up or it lands on your lap, you're not scrambling to get your resume updated and what are you going to say in the interview? And oh my gosh, what accomplishments are you going to highlight? All those things. So there's a lot of different pieces to the custom career roadmap, but it's having that written plan of intentionality that will propel your career to that next level. So that's a little bit about the custom career roadmap. I could go on for hours on that, but I'll leave it there.
No, that was great. Thank you so much for giving us those 4 points too, of things that we really should be looking at and preparing for. And it sounds to me like we need to be playing offense, not defense, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you just shared an opportunity comes up and now you're like, "Oh my gosh, what am I I have nothing ready. There's nothing prepared." And this is where when you've got those things prepared in advance, you are set to go. And so thank you for that because I think that's a great point that we all need to, probably implement. Have you looked at your resume recently? Does it need to be updated? You probably should take time to do that and looking at your skills and all of those things that you just shared. So excellent. Good stuff. And what do you mean when you talk about blind spots in careers? What
One of the things that I ask my clients to do is to uncover your blind spots. And what that is you cannot see yourself the way other people see you. So you have blind spots about yourself, about your performance, about your attitude. So when you are in that discovery phase of who you are and what you bring to the table, you want to go and talk to probably 3 to 5 colleagues that you trust, that you've worked with in the past, and just say, hey, I'm looking to improve myself. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. And the key here is to give them permission to be brutally honest. Say, you have my absolute permission to be 100% honest, because if you're not honest with me, then I can't grow. But you ask them 2 questions. What do I do well? And what can I do better? And from those 2 questions, you get feedback that's honest, that's a peer-based feedback. And you discover, so the things that you do well, you're going to say, thank you, I appreciate that. And you kind of put them to the side because you already do those well. But those things that they tell you, you can do this better, those are the things that you want to focus on so that you can develop that skill, upskill, whatever it is that you need to do. And that's how you start discovering yourself more and more. And the other thing about the custom career roadmap is that preparation is key. You know how in real estate, we always say location, location, location. For me, career advancement is all about preparation, preparation, preparation. Because the more you prepare, the more you dissipate that imposter syndrome and you gain that confidence, so that when you are ready to go talk to your manager about that raise or interview, then you walk in there and you're not worried about, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? Oh my gosh, what did they ask me questions that I don't know? We've already worked on all of that. So that's a little bit about uncovering your blind spots, which is kind of part of that whole custom career roadmap.
Yeah, that's great, Rosie. Thank you for sharing that. I think, again, we can take this information and just immediately begin using it if we're in this position that we want to better ourselves, to improve our chances of getting a better paying job, a higher level at the company that you're at, whatever the case may be. And this idea of asking your colleagues for feedback, it's not going to do you any good if they're going to be just like, oh, yeah, you're a great worker. You're doing fine. No, no. I need to know the hard truth. So give it to me straight. Right. But the thing that I wanted to share my thoughts on is not to just discount what you're doing well, but, save those things like, here's where I really excel, and have that also as a key for when you're going for these jobs. So obviously I know you're not saying just forget about those
Right.
things and work on these things that, you've really got to build your skills on. But that's gonna make the difference, right? When you're improving yourself based on that feedback that you're getting, then that you could take that information also and run with it. So, great points.
Absolutely. Yep. I agree with you.
Yeah. So, I know you went through some adversity in your life. Do you wanna share with us kind of how did you deal with what happened, and what did you learn from the experience that you went through?
Oh gosh. So the divorce was a very long, drawn out situation. And that's actually when I discovered personal development. And Desiree, I have to tell you that personal development helped me get through that phase of my life. And I actually went to a Landmark Education. Landmark Education is an organization that does almost like intense therapy in like 4 days. And they teach you about how humans attach meaning to things, people, and places. And when you figure out that when you detach that meaning from that thing, that person, or that place, you're able to then experience it from a different way, a different perspective. And so, a perfect example, my dad talks about this often, but he's like, before Landmark, Rosie would get a letter from the lawyer, and I'm thinking, oh my God, because it was a custody battle. So, oh my God, I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my kids. Oh my God. And then it was like crying, all the things. And then after Landmark, I would get a letter. I would realize that it's just a piece of paper with words on it. And even if I were to lose the custody of my kids, I was still going to be their mom. I was still going to love them. I was still going to be there for them. I was still going to do everything that I could to be a good mom. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned because it took that charge out of that very stressful situation. And it just made it a situation that I was going through, and I got through it because of the change in mindset and understanding that when you're so attached to the outcome and the outcome doesn't happen, that's when in our heads, our world falls apart. And so to me, I got through those 4 years because I was able to invest in myself. I took a course. I took advice of a friend saying, "Hey, this landmark education, could be really good for you." And it literally saved my life at the time. So huge lesson for me.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, you're so right. We do attach meaning to so many things, and I can relate to receiving letters, not necessarily about custody, but and other stuff. It could be IRS or whatever, and you see this letter and you're freaking out because you're immediately like, "What does this mean? And what is this about?" Instead of like just realizing, "Okay, I can address this thing," and it brought to mind this idea of we often get into the what if something happens instead of even if something happens. And
Yeah.
it sounds like your mind shifted to that even if this happens. And so I really love this idea of rethinking that because even if this happens, whatever it may be, I'm still going to be okay, or I'm still going to be their mom. And so I love this. Good stuff. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about how you created the career roadmap? You shared with us a little bit about the steps and kind of the points of what it's about, but how did you create it?
When I was a regional underwriting manager and I knew that the position for an executive vice president home office position was going to come up, I started preparing. And I started going through, I vividly remember going to the library and just looking at all the books in the career section. And I chose a book, what color, and they publish it every year. But I started going through that and I did all the exercises in the book. And I realized that that book was a self-discovery process. And the more you know about yourself, the more you're going to be able to articulate to others what you bring to the table. So it's funny because the company that I was working for at the time, they took a really, really long time to post a position. So that whole time I was preparing. And so at the end of the day, when I thought about it, and by the way, it was 6 months worth of doing all kinds of exercises. I had my sister interview me, my brother-in-law interview me. So at the end of the day, I earned the position of an executive vice president. And when I started looking back, I was like, wow, that was such a great process. And I kind of started bucketing and putting into different components. And I realized that I first had to understand what I aspired to be, then assess my skills, the whole enchilada from resume to LinkedIn, everything, get advice, and then advertise the fact that I wanted to become an executive vice president. And it was that 6-month journey that I had. And my husband always makes fun of me because he's like, "You're such a nerd. You like focus on something and then you're like a dog with a bone and you don't let go." And that whole time it was this self-discovery. And I'm not saying that you have to spend 6 months to do this process, but you definitely have to have some kind of plan. And for me, that turned into the custom career roadmap, that journey.
Oh, excellent, Rosie. Love it. And I think that you've made a good point in there about it doesn't have to take everybody the same amount of time. But if you are examining yourself, looking at your skills, looking at where you need to improve, getting the feedback, all of the things that you've shared so far, you're going to get there. And the length of time it takes is going to be different for everybody, but
Mhm.
it's just going to make you better.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So would you share with us what your thoughts are on how you think women hold themselves back in their careers?
Well, I think we've already talked about a couple of things. So not asking for what you need, but the other thing, the other way that they hold themselves back is by discounting themselves first. So the big statistic that, a lot of people know about already is that men apply for jobs having 50% of the skills and women wait till they have 100% of the skills. And that may or may not be true. Hewlett Packard supposedly did that, years ago. But the thing is that it's very true that a man looks at a job description, they're like, "Oh, I can do that. No, no big deal." And a woman's like, "Well, I don't have 3 or 4 of the requirements, so I need to wait till I get them all, and then I can apply." But by then, 2 things happen. The first one is that the job's already gone by the time you apply. And then the second thing is that if you have 100% of the skills, you're overqualified. And you're not going to be happy in a job where you already know all the skills. You already have all the characteristics to be successful in that position. And the key thing is if you're looking at a job that you're interested in, my motto is apply anyway. Let someone else make the decision that you're not qualified. Don't discount yourself before you let someone else look at your resume. So that's one thing. And then I was at an event this last Friday and I was a judge for high school students. They had to present like a marketing plan. And I had 8 kids. They're all, again, all in high school, 3 girls and 5 boys. The 3 girls come in and they're very meek. Their handshake is very weak. They're like, literally, their shoulders are down. And the guys, they're like, they come, to the table, they shake my hand, a strong handshake. Their voice totally just projects so great. And I actually left that event and I was a little disheartened because that's exactly what I'm passionate about. So the second way that women leave themselves behind is by acting that way. Not having a strong handshake, being meek, kind of putting your shoulders down instead of trying to take up space. That whole Amy Cuddy, the TEDx talk. Know that the way you portray yourself is the way you're going to be received. So when your shoulders are down and your head is down and your voice, you can barely hear you, that's another way that people see you and they're like, oh, that's not a leader because of the way you're presenting yourself. So those are just a couple ways that I have seen myself personally that women hold themselves back. And it's so incredibly important to, even as parents, to think about that and how we're socializing our daughters, because our girls, and there's a statistic that girls' confidence peaks at age 9, like 9 years old. And that to me is just so heartbreaking because then they don't pick up that confidence until their late 20s or early 30s where they're trying to get a promotion. But during that whole time, during like junior high, high school, college, that's when we need to be socializing confidence towards our daughters. And parents, we have to figure out how to do a better job at doing that.
Rosie, thank you so much for sharing that because I was thinking about that the whole time you were talking. And I was listening to the points you were making as well. And you did share some fantastic points. But the socializing and how we have historically raised our girls to behave really does not put them in a position that leads to advancement. And so thank you for pointing that out and really working with girls to teach them how to do this. Really take up space, be loud, have that firm handshake, just stand straight. These are just simple things, but we have done, I think, a disservice in not helping our girls to learn these skills that can take them, forward in their life. And I just had to say that there was kind of an interesting perspective on what you shared in there that I hadn't really heard before. And I was trying to keep that point in my mind so I could come back and touch on it. And maybe I'll come back around to it in a minute. But so much good stuff that you said in there. So I hope the listeners, maybe rewind and listen to that section again, because you just shared some great points in there for sure. And how we can not hold ourselves back from
Yes.
advancement. So yeah, good stuff. Let me ask you something. You talk a lot about how to create your story vault while interviewing. And so I really want to know what you mean by story vault And so would you share with us what this is?
Absolutely. And the Story Vault is, again, one of those components of the custom career roadmap. But a lot of times people are so focused on creating their resume. And I do want to say this, where I worked with a client and she spent over a year working on her resume. And but working on your resume is fine, but if you're spending a year focused on your resume, you're not spending time focusing on you and preparing yourself for that interview. So I just wanted to say that getting a professional resume writer is an investment, but it's going to free you from the formatting, from the ATS stuff, from all that stuff that you shouldn't be spending time on. I would rather you spend the time on your Story Vault. And what the Story Vault is, I have my clients answer like 30 to 40 behavioral interview questions. And if you use ChatGPT, you can copy and paste the job description and ask ChatGPT to give you 30 questions related to that particular job description. So I always say, when you're home and relaxed, answer all 30 or 40 questions that you have, because it gets your brain thinking in that interview format question. But it also might spark an accomplishment that you forgot about. You're like, oh my gosh, 5 years ago, I worked on this particular project. So that's step one. Step two is identify the top 10 accomplishments that you had over the last 10 years. And then use ChatGPT to turn those 10 accomplishments into a story. So identify the problem. What was the consequence of not solving that problem? And how did you or you and your team help solve that problem? And then now you have 10 stories that you can come into a conversation with, whether it's networking, your manager, an interview, that you can highlight, and you no longer have to figure out, what am I going to say? And I get this question all the time. Well, Rosie, what do I do if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? I'm like, that's super easy. All you have to do is, you know what? I'm not really sure about that, but I can tell you about this. And then pull one of your stories that's most relevant to that topic and then go from there. And that, so with the Story Vault, every time you have an interview, then you want to just review your stories, and then you know exactly what you're going to talk about. And then the next thing from there is crafting your script, which means taking the story, use powerful words, answer or speak in statements, not questions, and make sure that the words that you're using are assertive words. So that's the whole Story Vault, that I totally would rather people spend time on that than on the resume.
That is so great, Rosie. You gave some fantastic examples in there that the listeners can use right away. And you mentioned ChatGPT a couple of times, and I use this daily. So I
Yes.
recommend that, people really start trying to figure out how that works, because it is such a fantastic tool. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you're not familiar with AI, you're absolutely going to get left behind. So you really need to be spending a little bit of time on the side, figuring out how all that works, and use that tool to your benefit. And I remembered what it was about the other point of conversation, and I wanted to come back to it. And that's women not applying for jobs that they think they're not qualified for. And this is something I knew that most of the time, unless we can say, I know how to do that, we're not going to apply for that job. But your point about, if you come into this job already knowing how to do that, you're gonna be bored, you're not gonna be challenged. All of this stuff is like, I had never even thought of it in that way before.
Mhm.
So how interesting, and I hope the person listening, maybe that kinda gets their wheel spinning too. Look at it
Absolutely.
from that perspective.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I had a conversation with an adaptability coach not too long ago. And she said that by the time 2030 rolls around, if you haven't embraced AI by then, that's when you're literally going to be left behind, because companies are going to evolve so fast. And she also said that technology is going to be moving faster in the next 10 years than it has in the entire history of technology. So now is the time to really embrace that particular generative AI, whatever it is. There's thousands of them now, but embrace, start small, go in there, start practicing, ask ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, this is the first time I'm using you. How do I use you? And it'll give you a whole bunch of ways that you can use ChatGPT. But upskilling is incredibly important, especially right now.
Yeah, for sure. And we could have a whole conversation around how to use ChatGPT, and like you just shared, ask it how to use it.
Yes.
This idea of the prompts that you're putting in to get feedback from it is like becoming a whole industry in itself. So, yeah, I don't want to get off topic too much, but yeah, it's so fascinating to me. And you really, really, really need to be looking into this if you don't already know. Okay, so let's go on. And let me see. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how you've got a readiness checklist. And so, do you want to share with us what that means and what would be on it?
Yeah, so it's a promotion readiness checklist, and essentially it's a quiz. I ask you 10 questions, and based on your answers, you will know how close you are to being promotion ready. So, based on the 10 questions that I ask you, it's like, do you have your resume done? Do you have your LinkedIn done? Just questions like that. And then you'll get three results. You'll get you have work to do. You started, but you have work to do. You're doing well, but you need to do a lot more work, or you're doing great and now you need to go out there and advertise. You have to network, you have to market yourself. So those are the three results that people that take the quiz, the checklist quiz, will get, and it'll give them an idea of where they are in their process. If they need to start from scratch and, starting with the resume, then that's one thing. But if they've done all the things and they're still not advancing, something is not right. And it's probably because they're not telling people that they're looking for that next opportunity. And again, that's where I was, and I know exactly what that's all about. So that, from my perspective, I want people to kind of know where are they in their journey to become promotion ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for detailing that. And I think that it's great to know, right? Know where you're at in this process before you have to just leap. Not that we can't just take those leaps, but if you're ready, it's even better, in my opinion. Okay. Can you share with us your podcast, which is No Woman Left Behind? I know you have a show as well. How often do you release episodes? What do you talk about on the show? Share that if you would.
Yeah, sure. So my podcast is also called No Woman Left Behind, and that's also the name of my company. So I named them both the same. But I have experts come in and talk about a variety of things when it comes to women's careers. Like, for example, the other day I had a sleep coach come in and talk about how critically important it is to get good sleep so that you can go to work and you're focused and you're able to do the job to the best of your abilities. So the episodes are weekly, and it's all around women in their careers and different aspects of their careers and challenges. And I do have people come in and do interviews, and it's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to career advancement for women in the corporate world.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I'll link it in the show notes so the listeners can find it. And absolutely, I encourage people to check that out because anything that we can use as these tools to help us better ourselves is fantastic. So yeah, it sounds like a tremendous show. I love this idea too about having guests on that share how kind of like auxiliary, right? It's like things around how you can better yourself to be advancing your career and whatever. So I love it. And it's not unlike what I'm doing with this show in
Exactly.
general is knowledge that helps us to better ourselves. So love it. Okay, Rosie, at this point, is there anything you want to share with the person that's listening that you feel like maybe you haven't said yet or want to reiterate? Please share that with us now.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So people always come to me and they're like, oh, I need to get a new job. I need to get a new job. And I'm like, okay, well, let's slow down the roll. What's happening at your current job? Have you had a conversation with your manager about wanting to advance in your career? No. Have you had a conversation about, asking for more money? No. So the thing that I want to leave the listeners with is that, yes, going out and getting a new job is perfectly fine, but don't be blind to the company that you're at right now. And are there opportunities that you have not yet explored? Like, again, myself, I never said that I wanted a promotion until I did, and then they gave me a promotion. So, like, I should say I earned the promotion. But being intentional with what is it that you want to do? Are you in the right market? Are you in the right industry? Are you wanting to change all the way, to a totally different industry? And that part is the aspire segment of the custom career roadmap is, are you happy doing whatever it is that you're doing? Or do you hate it so much that you're trying to figure out what else to do and you haven't taken the time to figure that out? So just a couple of things that, again, you need to know yourself. You need to understand yourself so that then you can explain how you can bring value to others. So those are just a couple of other thoughts that we had not talked about before.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing those for sure. More things for us to think about and how they apply to what we're doing in our life. And anytime I feel like we examine ourselves, we learn something and we can make changes if we need to and better ourselves. So love it. Okay. I always love to ask my guests to share if there's books or podcasts that they want to suggest for the listeners. Do you have some that you'd like to share now that you think would be beneficial?
Yeah. So the first book that I wanted to share is Jamie Kern Lima published a book February of last year called Worthy. And I always talk about this book because she does such a great job at differentiating between self-confidence and like the imposter syndrome. And it is such a beautiful book because obviously she talks about her struggles. She started in her kitchen, then she sold her business for like millions of dollars. But the one thing that women come to me sometimes and ask for is, Rosie, help me build my confidence. And again, it goes to, I can help you, but it's preparation. I can't build confidence for you. You have to do it, for yourself. And so Jamie's book talks about needing to be worthy, to feel worthy, to be worthy. So that's one thing. And then the other book is Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. It's just a bunch of like the old Dear Sally type thing where she has collects all of these letters of different people. And it's just another version of Chicken Soup for the Soul type thing. So that was also a great book. And then as far as podcasts are concerned, Hidden Brain is fantastic because it has all kinds of different studies and experts on how the brain works. And I find it so fascinating. So that's kind of my go-to. And the fun one is with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. She has a podcast that's newer. It's called Wiser Than Me. And she interviews all women that are like over 80 and they talk about their life journey, like what they would do if they were to do it over again. So she's had people like Jane Fonda, Bonnie Raitt, Jane Goodall, people like that. But she's always so funny. I've always loved Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So to me, those are two great podcasts that aren't necessarily like learning, but you're learning at the same time. So that's a little bit about what I read and listen to on my off time.
Those are great recommendations for sure. So I'll link those in the show notes. I have the book Worthy, and I've been reading that as well. And it's just like, highlight, read, mark, highlight, read, mark, through this whole book, because it is fantastic. I had an opportunity to see her speak, and she's phenomenal. And the success and her journey and everything is just amazing. So great recommendation for sure. And I love the idea though of just some really positive things in the second book that you shared that, we need to have those things. We need to be reminded of those positive things. And yeah, so great stuff. And the podcast as well. I hadn't heard of Hidden Brain. So thank you for that recommendation. And Julia Louis Dreyfus's show. Yes, I love it. Yeah, definitely good stuff.
I love
So
her.
thank you for that. Rosie, lastly, would you share with the listeners how they can find you? Like, how can they see the work that you're doing? If they have questions for you, want to work with you, how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, it's super easy. They can go on nowomanleftbehind.com and it's WOMAN. So no woman left behind. And on there, you'll find my podcast. You'll find some of my services, some of my blogs. We actually just I have a membership and we had a negotiation expert come in. So I wrote a blog about that. So they can just go straight to No Woman Left Behind. If they want to send me a message, there's a way to message me there. So they can contact me through there.
Yeah, great. It sounds like there's some awesome resources there for the listeners. So I love it. And are you on any, you mentioned social media, LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else that you're active?
Yeah, then Instagram, TikTok. We're definitely on TikTok and YouTube, of course. So yeah, those are the main ones that we're on.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll be sure to link the details so the listeners can follow you in all the places they love to be. And just again, see all the work that you're doing and all of these great pieces of wisdom that you're sharing. So, thank you so much, Rosie, for coming on the show today and just empowering us, educating us, and really, I hope, inspiring the listeners with all of this goodness. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Desiree. And I appreciate your podcast as well. I listened to the podcast episode on the forgiveness and it would like blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I need to listen to this again. So you do a fantastic job as well. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. We'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.